All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible periods in human history, ancient Greece. I mean, its legacy is just monumental. It's shaped our art, our politics, even the very way we think. But here's the thing. How did this collection of small, kind of rocky city-states produce a cultural explosion that still echoes thousands of years later? Let's try and unravel the blueprint of their genius.
So when you think of these huge concepts, democracy, philosophy, theater, you almost immediately think of Greece, right? But the answer to where it all began isn't just a place on a map. No, it's a specific, totally revolutionary idea about how to live together. An idea that, as we'll see, fueled both incredible genius and profound, deep-seated inequality.
I mean, just take a look at this list. It's staggering. We're talking about government by the people, trial by jury, the very structures of tragedy and comedy that we still see in movies today. The Greeks basically created the blueprint for so much of what we just take for granted. But the real question, the one we're going to dig into, is why? What was their secret?
To really get to the heart of Greek achievement, we have to understand their most fundamental social structure. And it wasn't the city, not really, or the nation as we know it. It was something else entirely, the polis. And this wasn't just a place to live. It was the engine, the very engine that powered everything we've just been talking about.
You know, the word polis is famously untranslatable into a single English word. And there's a good reason for that. It's not just a city-state, and it's not just a community. It was this incredible fusion of the two, where the power of the government and the identity of the people were one and the same. It was a complete, all-encompassing way of life.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, especially for us today. We tend to separate things out, right? We have the state, that's the legal power, the government. Then there's society, that's our social lives, our friends, our culture. For the ancient Greeks, those things were totally fused together. The polis was the community. So your freedom wasn't measured by how independent you were from the state, but by how actively you participated in it. A totally different mindset. And that participation was incredibly direct. I mean, at the heart of most of these city-states, you had these three main bodies. You had the assembly, where citizens would literally get together to debate and vote on big decisions. Then the councils, which did the day-to-day work, and then the magistracies. These were public offices often filled by drawing lots, literally picking names out of a hat, so everyone had a chance to take part. It was a government of us, not them. And this famous line from Aristotle, it just perfectly captures that whole Greek mindset. When he said man is a political animal, he didn't mean we all like to argue about politics. He meant that a human being is an animal specifically designed to live in a polis. To be fully human, to live a good and fulfilling life, you had to take part in the political life of your community. It wasn't just a duty, it was the entire point of being human. But, and this is a huge but, this incredibly public, participatory world wasn't open to everyone, not even close. In fact, the structure of the polis created two starkly different realities, two completely separate worlds, in which one you lived in depended entirely on who you were. So, if you were a male citizen, and especially an elite one, the polis offered this amazing life of public engagement and intellectual excitement. The city itself was like a giant stage for debate, for politics, and for the constant exchange of new ideas. And a perfect example of this was the symposium. Now, this was not just a drinking party, okay? It was a highly structured event where the elite men of the city would gather to debate philosophy, to recite poetry, and to forge those critical social bonds that held the whole polis together. Think of it like an exclusive intellectual incubator where new ideas were constantly being tested and culture was being created. But if you were a woman, your reality was the complete and total opposite. Your world wasn't the public square, it was the private home. It was a life defined by walls, both literal and figurative, a life of severe restriction and exclusion. The legal and social limitations were, well, they were absolute. A woman was basically a legal minor for her entire life, passed from the control of her father to the control of her husband. Her whole purpose was to run the household and produce legitimate male heirs to continue the family line. She was completely barred from that public, political life that, remember, was supposed to define what it meant to be a full human being.
So here is the great paradox, isn't it? How did this society, which was so intensely competitive and public for a select few, but deeply restrictive for everyone else, how did it lead to one of the greatest cultural explosions in all of history?
Well, the answer, surprisingly, lies in the very structure of the polis itself. And this timeline just shows you the incredible density of that explosion. This wasn't something that happened over centuries. No, in the span of a single lifetime. In Athens, you had Pericles rebuilding the Acropolis, you had Sophocles basically reinventing drama, and you had Socrates walking around questioning everything. These weren't just names in a history book, they were neighbors, living and arguing in the very same polis at the very same time. See, the competitive nature of the polis turned everything into a kind of public spectacle, an arena. Theater wasn't quiet entertainment. It was a huge civic festival where playwrights competed fiercely for prizes. Philosophy wasn't done in some stuffy ivory tower. It was debated right out in the agora, the public marketplace. The polis created this high-stakes arena where new ideas were constantly being tested, challenged, and refined right out in the open. Now, this ancient world might seem really distant, but that blueprint designed by the Greeks, with all of its brilliance and all of its deep flaws, it's still baked into the very foundation of our own societies today. Let's just trace some of those lines, right? You can see it here. The Greek concept of the politeia, their form of a constitution, is the direct ancestor of our own systems of government. The wild debates they had in their public assemblies, you can hear the echoes of those in our modern parliaments. Their invention of tragoidia, or tragedy, literally created the dramatic structures we still use in movies and plays. And their development of systematic philosophy, well, that laid the groundwork for modern science and all of critical inquiry. It's all connected. So, we're left with this really complex inheritance. The polis was this incredible crucible that forged genius, but it did so through a system of radical inclusion for a few and radical exclusion for the many. It gave us democracy and philosophy, but it also built them on a foundation of patriarchy and slavery. So the real question for us today is to look around and ask ourselves, which parts of that ancient blueprint are we still building with?